Welcome everyone. This is chapter 5, Causes and Risks of the Health Metrics and the Spread of Infectious Diseases book club. So today we look at the overview of the causes and risks related to the calculation of health metrics. We identify the objective of the research question as a important step for calculating the metrics correctly. And then we mentioned briefly how causal inference get into the meaning of the identify a correct, research question for calculating the metrics. Here is the book in the book down version, and this is the chapter. So I found that when talking about risks, fear is the feeling which is the most pervasive emotion driving the identification of a risk level. So especially in our modern society. It shapes our decision, drives public policies, management, and influences how we perceive risks. So how much of this is justified? I've found this book by Joanna Burke, Fear, Cultural History, 2007, fairly interesting. And it explored the history of fear and how it has shaped our society. So I found this quotation very impacting and important to as a driver for identify different level of risks within our society. So basically, we know that fears is a powerful emotion, and it can influence our decision and perceptions. So, for example, it can be a useful tool for survival, because if you feel a bit of fear, you might be attempting to be more careful, and so your survival, it might be close. So it might be that you might survive to some risks more than attempting to act on a more like less irrational way. And so here it comes to the identification of people that might have these tendencies of perceiving risks differently. Historically, risks were identified as the risk of, with obviously we are talking about health metrics, and so the risk of starvation, the risk of getting infected due to infectious diseases spread, the risk of conflicts, violent conflicts, and these were like the most important ones. Along the time, the perception of risks change, and so modern risks focus more on diseases that are chronic, so they repeat systematically, such as obesity, cardiovascular disease, or cancer, and as well as the perceived level of the threat, so such as the fear of terrorism, the spread of pandemics, and in general environments risks. And so thinking about how the perception of risk changes along the time, the GBD, the global burden of disease, focus on important risk factors that through studies and research were identified as the most influencing health condition. So such as behavioral risks, environmental risks, occupational and metabolic. Okay, so here in the chapter, just provide a short introduction to these things. This is a nice flowchart that would be interesting to add, but maybe I'll add that. No, I don't know. But then, as you can see, I stopped on condition and injuries. Look at the different risk measures that are used, and then think about what can be the cause. It's very important. So I'll stop for a second, and I want to see you. I don't see you anymore. If you have any questions or share some is professional experience on this, what do you think about the different perception of risks that people might experience? Do you have any questions or something to share with me? Maybe. I don't know if you are like bit of like risky person, someone that like to play hard with things in life, or a bit more protective one.
Risk-averse person.
You are, sorry?
Very risk-averse. I don't like to take risks.
Do you like that or not? Do you like to...
Oh, no, I do not. So I'm a very protective
okay.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm yeah, sometimes I feel like I lose chance, but I rather fear to be certain about things than risk everything. What about the others?
Yeah, I'd say similarly. I'm a risk averse person and don't take risks. So, yeah.
Sometimes risks pay, if you play and you're lucky, you might have a good chance for gaining more than haven't risk at all. But there is always the other side of the situation, so it might happen completely the same, the opposite. So yeah, so this is interesting part that it might be worth it to expand a bit here in this book. I've just very briefly mentioned it, and it obviously it would be needed to expand on this topic much more, but it is outside of the scope of this book in some senses. So there is a part of the GBD calculation of the burden of diseases, it's quite very well expanded on considering risks. For here, I've just briefly mentioned it a bit. What are the type of risks that are considered? And when we say the risks, have an outcome, and this outcome are some certain conditions or injuries that are following some causes and risks that are factors, key factors within the play a key role within the calculation. But not always when you first approach this the health metrics calculation, you might don't focus on them that much. But then if you want to go a bit more in depth on the topic, you might need to think that would be turned out to be very important. Think about external causes that might influence the final result. So you first level calculation, then you have a result, and then you say that might be changing if I consider lifestyle choices, environmental factor, infections, poverty, aging, genetics, injuries, so many things. Each one of these first level of risks leads to it's connected to a particular secondary level. So for example, if we think about stroke, which is quite interesting because the stroke, it's very difficult to prevent, and it's very awful. It has a very awful outcome, and this is always linked to heart disease. So the stroke and the lifestyle, correct lifestyle or different lifestyle, or more focus on stroke outcome lifestyle might help you to reduce this type of risk. And so all the others, I'm not listing them all, but each one of them, has a particular outcome. And here in the book, I would just briefly mention which one of this factor might influence and which type of are they. So this network, this one here, this is a seems like not fairly a different one, but as we are calculating the metrics, here is within the place, and the other are the cause and injuries. This might be worth it to explain that a bit more, and then the various elements that get into the meaning of the calculation of the DALYs. So and this is the bit. The risk measures identify the cause, then and the risk. Then we like to be able to calculate this type of risks. And so first we need to identify the risk exposure. And here in the such, to give you an example, risk is the likelihood that an individual will experience a specific health outcome, such as illness or injuries due to certain behaviors, exposures, or conditions. And so, for example, as an exposure, we can think about smoking, physical inactivity, or high blood pressure, such as hypertension and others. So this is some type of risk exposure that might lead to risk-specific outcomes. So when you think about risks, you need to think of like something that builds on top of the other, and try to identify the first level of risks, and then what can be the related causes that might influence that risk. So we can think about specific populations risks, such as aging, genetics, or the economical situation of the population. And on this purpose, there is a social demographic index, which is used to compare the level of countries, and this is one of the most important elements that need to be considered when thinking about making a picture of what's happening within a population health level. And another important element is the consideration of the CRA, so the comparative risk assessment that is done to identify the minimum risk exposure. And so these minimum levels can be identified as theoretical, plausible, feasible, and cost effective. So now the combination of risks obviously play an important role. And when we jump into the causal inference, we attempt to identify if they are additive, multiplicative, or just play as an interactive element. But then you need to think about if they are, changing the game by confounding your analysis, and so they might not be that interesting to be considered. So there are quite a few elements that gets into play when thinking about risks. But then, think about that you have just some data and you want to use this data. You might want to calculate a relative risk of some exposed or some groups. And so you think about the proportion of exposed and unexposed. And here, just to give you an idea, you can consider that as the probability of some disease due to, so let's say, let's talk about the ratio, okay, of the probability of exposure among cases of the to the probability of exposure among non-cases. And so you think about that as a probability. And here in the book there is also a little very basic example. So you like have number of exposed to some risk and the number of unexposed to the same risks. And so you can calculate the relative risk by here is a simple function, and to have this ratio. In this case, for example, a relative risk of 1.04 indicate that the exposed group is one time more likely to develop that outcome compared to an exposed group. So it's a positive exposure. Just to give an idea of what how we can like simply identify if that risk is more dangerous for the exposed or the unexposed. There is another example here that we can consider. So I don't know if you like to identify this type of risk. So if we have like D1 as the number of events and D0 as the number of events in the unexposed groups. So we have 50 events in the exposed group, and we need to consider the percent time. So this is a very surface briefly explanation. Obviously, you need it's assumed that you know what is the percent time at risk is. And you might want to, you know, search for that a bit more. So it gives for granted that you know what is a percent time is, but just to briefly mention it, you know, it consider how many people get into be exposed to that risk and for how long that number of people is affected by that risk, is exposed at that risk. So here we have a little plot with the exposed and unexposed groups to show the difference of a positive exposition. So it's one time. And so in addition, you have a way to make a GGDAG, so a network plot. And so here you can see how to make the same plot and use synthetic elements to show that these elements influences X that then will be influencing the final outcome. And so what is important within the calculation the risk measures is the calculation of the relative risks, the theoretical minimum risk exposure level, and the population attributable factor. So the TMREL, it's very important because it set the level of risks. If a certain risk go over the minimum level, it will be considered, otherwise not. And the population attributable factor, so the PAF, is the proportion of disease that would be eliminated if the exposure were removed. So as well as these elements get into the meaning of identification of the risks that get influencing the analysis of a particular disease on a country compared to compare it to other countries. And so in this case, we have for the population attributable fractions, the probability of the disease and the probability of the disease given the exposure, the probability of the exposure given the disease on the probability of the disease. So this is a simple proportion that is considered as the probability of that population will be affected by that particular disease. And here there is some interesting simulation of a risk exposure. I found this very interesting, this function simulated logistic. This is from the DGT package. And what does is basically simulating your DAG. You first identify the DAG and then set the DAG, and then you want to use this function to simulate it. And then you can fit the model on the data and even predict and see what are the two density distributions. So this is very interesting. I already mentioned these other two elements that are key to identify in terms of DALIs. What are the level of different type of risk that gets into a particular the calculation of particular disease level within the population. And so all this all together leads to thinking about that causal inference. It's as it is the process of drawing a conclusion about a causal connection. It's very important to take consideration of it when answering a question. Yes, Robert, sorry. Tell me.
Take myself off mute there. Sorry, I just I wondered if you could just go into a little bit more detail as to on the code for the simulation of risk exposure. So where we have the Daggerty function, what kind of model is that plotting?
The logistic model.
No, just sorry, the bit a little bit further up in.
Okay, and
No,
here,
further up. So yeah, in that Daggerty function, you've got using a DAG, and then there's the stuff within the curly brackets.
yeah, these are just the elements that are just as the same as here. So you can see,
Right.
Yeah, are the elements to build the network, the graph. So in this case, we can even jump into R and see this. Let me see if I do that. Okay. So basically this way we create a DAG structure, just as the same as this one here, just to give you an idea. Okay. So, but in a way that then it can be used with a tidy DAG function, and then it's simulated. Basically, what if you look at the result is these arrows here are put in all possible simulated in all possible direction. So like C1 goes to X, but then goes to C2, and then goes to C3 and to Y, just to give you an idea, no? Okay, consider all possible outcomes. It simulates the directions of the elements going one way and the other way. Okay, because in this case it's a logistic.
Yeah. Okay. I think I get that. So we've got exposure to outcome, and then all the three confounders, both with a causal effect on the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This is a bit of like the expression of the function. It constructs a DGT graph, just a DAG. But then that DAG, if you tidy up, we can even jump into R. So now I'm not. See again. Open up a file. You are not seeing, right? I don't think you are seeing. Okay, you're not
No, I
seeing.
can just see the book.
I share. Okay, now you should be able to see it. Okay, so here this is let me see, the GT. Okay, and so do you know about this? If you do like a question mark and then the package, in particular this package has the function that is just as the same as the name of the package, and so it parses the GT graph. Okay, construct the GT, and here if we go down to see an example, okay, we can see that we have more or less the same thing. We need to, there is a particular structure to use. This might be like tricky or difficult, but you look at the example and you just do the same. Once the DAG is created, it looks like this. Okay, so this is what is the structure of a DAG that we have created. And as you can see, the E goes to 0, and then we could even plot the DAG. Okay, see if it does. Okay, can you see it? So C, E goes to 0, to O, or 0, okay, C1. This is just, you know, just to give you an idea how to use that. And then we can use the tidy GT to, because I loaded the tidyverse, but then ok, GG DAG. Ok, questo maybe I did something, you know, we miss because I loaded earlier, so you don't need it for that things. And this is from GG DAG. Okay, so it should work now. And now your DAT as a form of, can you see it? As a form of a data set that you can then like simulate. You can simulate with this simulated logistic function. That if we look at the function, which is this, basically interprets input DAG as a structural description of a logistic model in which each variable is binary and its log odds radio is a linear combination of its parent values. And so we can simulate this. It treats as 0 and 1, basically. And if we like set the C and this, then we have the simulated data. Okay. Going back to here, so we can see that this data is then used with this formula in to fit a logistic regression model. And then the relative risk is calculated. Did I answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. It's a bit, takes a bit to, if you are, you know, to look at it, but it's quite interesting and useful as well, because then you can identify how the relative risk shapes for different levels. And so I already mentioned these other two factors that are used to identify the level of risks. And so this within the studies, you might want to calculate those to see if your risk is get into the meaning of your analysis. And so thinking about the cause as well as the effect. And here is a very, very basic, less than basic, simple attempt to introduce the importance of causal inference when considering risks. And finally, here is just a little summary of with examples of what we did it along the chapter. And then see you. I don't know if you have any questions. I stop sharing. Okay. So in the gbdhealth.org website, as well as I mentioned it last week, within the methods appendix and methods, you find the methods used to calculate all the elements, as well as how the risks for particular diseases are considered. And so I warmly suggest you, if you're interested on this topic, to look at that as well. And I stopped sharing. I noted that I have some issue here when I click on the link, it doesn't lead to the reference that is mentioned, and I'm looking to it, so hopefully it gets fixed soon as possible. And then stop sharing for a second, because I next want to look at next week. We have Chantal that is going to introduce us about machine learning, and so that is nice. And this is everything for today. If you have any, if you need any help pushing your notes, which is something that quite straightforward, because you need to open up a branch, do your where is it, and then do your changes, make your changes, and then commit them. It will appear a green band on top here. Then you submit the issue, you push your changes, and then John will approve them. So quite straightforward. There is everything explained in here, that if you just follow step by step all the passages, all you will be able to do that quite easily. But as I said, if you need any help, just let me know. Be happy to help you out.
Do those the slides need to be in Markdown? Well, I've got mine in Cohort, or I can convert them if need be.
Yeah, it is in Markdown at the moment. So,
Okay, I'll change my slides and put in a pull request. Yeah.
yeah, we can. Yeah, it's very minor changes to, but it would be nice to have them, just to have what we done within this book club to share with you. Okay, thank you very much. The book will be soon in Italian as well. Sorry about that. So I'll stop. Thank you, everyone, and I hope I'll see you next week.